in the morning.
Welcome back to our channel, your ultimate source for the deepest dives into Genoa City. Today is a beautiful day to unravel the darkest, most heart-wrenching mysteries currently gripping the Newman family. We are breaking down every agonizing detail of the latest developments. Grab your coffee and brace yourselves, because the emotional stakes have never been higher. Let us dive right in. The invincible facade is cracking. Time is running out. The walls are closing in on the Newman matriarch in a way that is truly terrifying to witness. For decades, Nikki Newman has stood as an immovable pillar of strength, elegance, and unyielding fortitude in Genoa City. She has survived the most brutal corporate wars, the most devastating personal betrayals, and her own harrowing, highly publicized battles with addiction. She has always emerged from the ashes, stronger and more resolute than before. But now, a silent, invisible assassin is tearing through her mind, and the devastation is absolute. The symptoms are no longer just subtle inconveniences that she can brush away with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. They are violent. They are terrifying. They are escalating with a rapid, merciless intensity that threatens to extinguish the brightest light in the Newman family. The blinding headaches are no longer just a dull ache. They are agonizing, skull-crushing waves of pain that leave her breathless, disoriented, and desperately clutching her temples in the shadows of the Newman mansion. The edges of her vision are darkening, blurring the faces of the people she loves the most, replacing the vibrant world of Genoa City with a terrifying, encroaching blackness. The near-fainting spells are becoming impossible to hide, transforming every single step she takes into a perilous, life-threatening gamble. Nikki is crumbling, the matriarch is falling, and the sheer terror of her physical decline is sending massive, irreversible shockwaves through the very foundation of the Newman Empire. Victoria Newman is watching her mother die. She sees it. She feels it. The sheer, suffocating panic is clawing at her throat with every passing second. Victoria has always been the ultimate corporate shark, a woman who navigates billion-dollar acquisitions and boardroom bloodbaths with icy, calculated precision. She is her father's daughter, molded in the fires of Newman Enterprises, but in the face of her mother's mortality, that icy exterior is melting into a puddle of absolute, unadulterated terror. She observes the subtle, terrifying changes in Nikki's demeanor that others might miss. The way Nikki grips the edge of the heavy mahogany desk just a fraction of a second too long to steady herself. The way she closes her eyes tight, wincing as another invisible dagger of pain slices violently through her brain. Victoria's heart pounds a frantic, deafening rhythm against her ribs. She is terrified. She is desperate. She absolutely refuses to lose her mother. The dynamic between them is shifting dramatically, altering the very fabric of their relationship. Victoria is no longer the daughter seeking approval. She is the fierce, protective guardian desperately trying to save a woman who stubbornly refuses to be saved. Nikki's pride is a formidable, impenetrable fortress. She continuously attempts to downplay the severity of her condition. She masks her agony with forced smiles and dismissive remarks, blaming the horrifying symptoms on stress or a simple flare-up of her pre-existing multiple sclerosis. But Victoria is not a fool. She knows the difference between a chronic illness flare-up and a rapid, aggressive death sentence. The tension in the Newman executive offices is thick enough to cut with a knife. Victoria cannot stand the denial for another second. The stakes are simply too high. She corners Nikki. She demands action. She issues ultimatums. They are crackles with desperation. You need a doctor. Now. Today. I will not watch you waste away. Short, sharp sentences pierce the heavy silence of the room. Victoria is pleading. She is begging. She is commanding her mother to fight for her life. But Nikki, ever the proud queen, pushes back with everything she has left. She views her illness as a private humiliation, a glaring weakness that Victor and her countless enemies might brutally exploit. She refuses to become a burden to her children. She refuses to be pitied by the society she has ruled for decades. This is the tragic, heartbreaking irony of Nikki Newman. Her greatest strength, her unbreakable pride, is now the very thing accelerating her demise. Victoria, realizing that a traditional hospital visit might trigger a massive media frenzy and alert Victor prematurely, pivots her strategy with desperate brilliance. She suggests a discreet, off-the-record medical consultation with someone they implicitly trust. she suggests Nate Hastings. Nate Hastings is the perfect, logical choice in this terrifying, high-stakes scenario. He possesses the medical brilliance required to navigate a complex, highly dangerous neurological crisis, and more importantly, he possesses the absolute discretion required to handle a massive Newman family secret. Victoria knows that Nate understands the delicate, highly combustible dynamics of their powerful family. He knows exactly how to keep a devastating secret from the all-seeing eyes of Victor Newman. Victoria desperately hopes that Nate can break through Nikki's impenetrable wall of denial. She hopes that Nate's calm, clinical, yet deeply empathetic approach will force Nikki to confront the terrifying reality of her failing body before it is too late. The suggestion hangs in the air, a desperate lifeline thrown into a raging, destructive storm. Nikki hesitates. The raw fear in her eyes is palpable and heartbreaking. She knows that stepping into Nate's office means crossing a permanent point of no return. It means acknowledging that the darkness encroaching on her vision might be permanent. It means facing the terrifying, inescapable possibility that her time on this earth is violently running out. But the physical deterioration will not wait for Nikki to make up her mind. The illness is aggressive. It is relentless. It strikes without warning and without mercy. The horrifying climax of this medical mystery unfolds during a highly publicized, critical Newman Enterprises event. The room is packed with the wealthy elite of Genoa City, the flashing cameras, the blinding lights, the suffocating, immense pressure to perform. Nikki is standing at the podium, attempting to project the flawless image of an untouchable corporate titan. But the invisible assassin strikes with brutal force. A blinding, agonizing surge of pain rips through her skull, sharper and more violent than any before. The luxurious room spins violently out of control. The faces of the crowd blur into a chaotic, terrifying smear of unrecognizable colors. She gasps for air that will not come. She stumbles backward. Her hands desperately claw at the wooden podium for purchase, but her strength entirely evaporates. The collective gasp of the crowd echoes through the cavernous hall as the invincible Nikki Newman collapses to the floor, her body betraying her in the most public, humiliating, and terrifying way imaginable. Victoria screams. She abandons all decorum. She abandons the carefully crafted corporate facade. She is just a terrified, desperate daughter sprinting toward her fallen mother. The chaos in the room is absolute. The panic is suffocating. Paramedics are swarming the venue within minutes. The flashing red lights of the ambulance paint the towering Newman building in a sinister, bloody hue. Victoria rides in the back of the ambulance, clutching Nikki's cold, limp hand, praying to a god she desperately hopes is listening. The emergency room is a chaotic blur of sterile white walls, frantic nurses, and the terrifying, rhythmic beeping of heart monitors. And then, the devastating blow is finally delivered by the medical team. The initial diagnosis shatters Victoria's entire world into a million giant, irreparable pieces. A rapidly growing brain tumor. The horrifying words hang in the sterile air like a permanent death sentence. It is not a simple MS relapse. It is a monstrous, aggressive invader that is actively, greedily devouring Nikki's brain. The reality is far more dangerous, far more lethal than anyone could have ever anticipated. The aftermath of the brutal diagnosis is a masterclass in psychological agony. Nikki, regaining consciousness in the quiet, sterile hospital room, is forced to stare directly into the dark abyss of her own mortality. She is terrified, but beneath the sheer terror lies a profound, devastating sense of isolation. She makes a shocking decision. She does not want Victor to know. She does not want his pity. She does not want him to return to her side out of a sense of tragic obligation or guilt over their recent, bitter estrangement. She wants him to love her for who she was, not mourn her before she is even gone. This heartbreaking, stubborn decision forces Victoria to carry the crushing, suffocating weight of this massive medical secret entirely alone. Victoria instantly becomes the primary decision-maker, the weary general leading a desperate war against an invisible, unbeatable enemy. The pressure on Victoria is unimaginable and soul-crushing. She is fighting with every ounce of her being to save her mother's life while simultaneously fighting to keep the Newman Empire from completely imploding under the weight of Victor's relentless, toxic machinations. And this is where the storyline takes a sharp turn into absolute, gut-wrenching emotional devastation. Nikki, firmly believing that her days are strictly numbered and that the end is rapidly approaching, makes a solitary, agonizing decision. She decides to put her complex affairs in order. She decides to rewrite her legacy before the tumor steals her ability to do so. In the quiet, suffocating loneliness of the vast Newman mansion, surrounded by the heavy ghosts of her past and the terrifying specter of her imminent future, Nikki secretly drafts a new will. She makes shocking, unprecedented decisions about her vast personal assets and her powerful, highly coveted position within Newman Enterprises. She is preparing for the absolute end. She is actively orchestrating the final distribution of her life's work, attempting to ensure that her family is protected from the inevitable, explosive fallout of her death. It is a morbid, terrifying task, driven entirely by a mother's desperate, enduring, and tragic love for her deeply flawed family. Victoria, driven by a frantic need to organize her mother's chaotic medical records and legal affairs, stumbles upon the freshly drafted, highly confidential document. The scene is incredibly raw and stripped of all pretense. The silence in the room is deafening, broken only by the sound of Victoria's ragged breathing. Victoria's eyes frantically scan the dense legal jargon, the cold, clinical distribution of lifelong assets, the final, permanent directives of a woman who is actively preparing to die. And this is the moment I almost screamed at the screen. The sheer emotional gravity of the scene is paralyzing. Victoria reads the specific, heartbreaking clauses. She sees the careful provisions made for her, for Nick, for Abby, and for her beloved grandchildren. She sees the shocking transfer of immense corporate power, the unexpected beneficiaries chosen to carry on the legacy, the final, desperate attempts of a dying matriarch to secure peace in a family historically defined by endless, brutal war. The realization hits Victoria with the devastating force of a runaway freight train. Her mother is giving up. Her mother is accepting defeat at the hands of the tumor. Victoria chokes back a violent sob. The tears, which she has fought so fiercely and proudly to suppress for weeks, finally break through her carefully constructed defenses. She is holding the physical, undeniable manifestation of her mother's impending death in her trembling hands. The crisp white paper feels incredibly heavy, burdened with the immense weight of 1,000 unspoken goodbyes and a lifetime of shared memories. Victoria's grief is a physical, agonizing ache deep in her chest. She falls to her knees on the expensive rug, clutching the legal document tightly to her heart, weeping with a profound, shattered vulnerability that we have rarely, if ever, seen from the Ice Queen of Newman Enterprises. She is mourning the profound loss of her mother while her mother is still breathing in the next room. The psychological torment is exquisite and utterly unbearable. She realizes in this shattering moment that all the money, all the corporate power, all the boardroom victories mean absolutely nothing in the face of this terminal, inescapable human reality. But the overwhelming grief quickly curdles into a burning, righteous, and dangerous fury. Victoria's analytical, strategic mind begins to connect the terrifying, hidden dots. She looks back at the exact timeline of Nikki's rapid physical decline. She intensely analyzes the triggers, the stress factors, the immense, crushing psychological pressure that has been mercilessly placed upon her mother's fragile shoulders over the past few months. And the realization is a sickening, horrifying epiphany that rocks her to her core. Victor, her father, the great, untouchable Victor Newman, is inextricably linked to this medical catastrophe. Victoria uncovers the dark, toxic truth about Victor's recent, ruthless actions. She discovers his relentless, cruel manipulation of Matt Clark, using a dangerous amnesiac as a pawn. She uncovers his obsessive, destructive campaign to reclaim Newman Enterprises from Phyllis Summers at any cost, regardless of the collateral damage. She realizes that Victor's insatiable thirst for vengeance and absolute control created a toxic, high-stress environment that actively, undeniably accelerated Nikki's physical deterioration. The unbearable stress of Victor's secret corporate wars, the constant, suffocating anxiety of his ruthless ultimatums, the heavy emotional toll of his cold, emotional distance, all of these factors acted as a lethal, accelerating catalyst for the monstrous tumor growing in Nikki's brain. Victoria realizes with absolute clarity that her father's blind ambition is literally killing her mother. The betrayal is absolute and unforgivable. The fury building inside Victoria is volcanic and ready to erupt. Victoria is no longer just fighting a deadly brain tumor, she is preparing to fight the very patriarch of the Newman family. This revelation completely and permanently shatters the fundamental dynamic of the Newman family structure. Victoria, who has spent her entire life desperately seeking her father's approval, who has ruthlessly executed his darkest corporate strategies without question, now views him as the ultimate, unforgivable enemy. He is the architect of her mother's suffering. He is the catalyst for this impending, irreversible tragedy. The impending confrontation between Victoria and Victor is destined to be a seismic, earth-shattering event that will alter the landscape of Genoa City forever. Victoria is armed with the devastating, undeniable truth of Nikki's terminal diagnosis, the heartbreaking reality of the secret will, and the righteous, unyielding fury of a daughter violently protecting her dying mother. She is preparing to go to absolute war. She is preparing to tear down the entire Newman empire brick by brick if it means saving Nikki's life or avenging her death. The stakes are apocalyptic. The emotional fallout will be catastrophic and far-reaching. Victoria is ready to burn Victor's machinations to the ground. She will not allow him to continue his toxic, manipulative games while Nikki fights a losing battle for every agonizing breath. The line in the sand has been drawn in blood and tears. As we watch this tragic, beautifully acted, and deeply harrowing storyline unfold, we are forced to grapple with profound, unsettling questions about legacy, mortality, and the devastating, irreversible cost of absolute power. Nikki Newman is facing the ultimate, final battle. Her body is rapidly failing, her brilliant mind is under brutal siege, and her legendary family is on the verge of a historic, violent fracture from which they may never recover. Victoria is standing at the precipice of absolute heartbreak, clutching a last will and testament that signifies the tragic end of an era. The tears, the terror, the blinding headaches, the secret medical consultations, they are all building toward a devastating, inescapable climax that will leave viewers breathless. The Newman family will never, ever be the same after this storm passes. The invincible matriarch is fading into the dark shadows, leaving behind a complex legacy of immense strength, profound love, and impending, unavoidable tragedy. Will Nate Hastings be able to offer a miraculous, last-minute medical intervention before it is entirely too late? Will Victoria be able to successfully dismantle Victor's toxic empire and force him to face the devastating, lethal consequences of his actions? Or will the shocking contents of Nikki's secret will be executed much sooner than anyone could have ever anticipated, plunging the Newman family into a dark, irreversible abyss of grief and bitter regret? As the clock violently ticks down on Nikki Newman's life, we are left holding our breath, waiting for the final, devastating blow to fall. How far will Victoria go to punish the man who pushed her mother to the brink of death?